In this video, we're going to see how we can start using the Unity terrain system. First thing we're going to do is prepare our level to be used with the terrain system. So we're going to group up our whole gray box level and move it up 100 units. Why are we doing that? Well, the way that the terrain system works, you can't make lakes or valleys. When it's default, you can only raise it. So if we go ahead and make our level at a default elevation of 100 units, that means we can push our terrain down 100 units. So the easiest way to do that would be we can actually delete our main camera since our first person controller has a camera. So we're just cleaning up our hierarchy right now. You can see that first person controller has our camera still. I'm going to go ahead and duplicate this template group. I want to grab everything in my level and put it in this group. And then I'm going to go to my inspector up here, type in 100 units. That's moved everything up. And then we can just simply unparent those objects by selecting them all and just dragging out. And we can delete that template group. Now our level is hung in the sky. I am going to create another template group, and I'm going to call this my gray box. And we're going to get everything associated with my gray box level into this group right here. And then we're going to create a layer so we can lock all this down so we can't accidentally select it or delete it or move it. So we'll go to layers up here in the top right and go to edit layers, and we'll just type in gray box. As you can see, I already have right there. And then it gets a little annoying. You have to go back out. And now that we have that layer created, we're going to select my gray box group, and we're going to set its default layer right here in the inspector to gray box. And then Unity is going to ask me this change layer question. Yes, change children. That means everything inside of this gray box group that we just made will be considered part of this layer. And now we have options to hide and to lock down our layer right up here. See how gray box now shows up? Now we can hide it and lock it down. And the last thing we're going to do is make sure our lighting is set up where it's not going to interfere with the process of testing and trying the level. So we'll go to Window, Rendering, Lighting Settings, and then we're going to go down here to Auto Generate, turn that off. Oh, cancel that. And be sure you don't hit Generate Lighting. We want to hit the arrow down here and just clear all baked data. Next, we're going to come up here to our ambient lighting. And for right now, we're going to change it to a color. And this ambient color will kind of be the base color in your scene. So click it, we get a color wheel, and now you can see that the level is lighting up in the background. So, you can go white, and that'll give, I'm going to go a little bit off-white and give it a little bit of sunlight, a little bit of orange there. All right, so that's our lighting settings taken care of. So now that everything's nice and prepared, we're going to create our first terrain layer. So we're going to go to, or just our first terrain object. So we're going to go to 3D object, or game object, 3D object, and terrain. And it's going to give you this big old patch. I want you to move that patch to, center it in your level or so. This is actually pretty huge. It would take you a little bit to walk through. As you can see, it creates it at our 0 length, our 0 height in the Y. So we can see it's underneath our terrain here. So we're going to go up and fix that. With our terrain selected, we're going to go in here into the inspector, and we're going to go to our paint terrain, and we're going to go to what is it? Set height. And we're going to set the height over here in our inspector to 100. And I think if we press flatten all, it'll just automatically set all of our terrain to the 100 level mark, and it's back where our level is. And now we can sculpt down and up. Now we're going to see about how we can actually sculpt our terrain. So I'm going to come out here kind of near but plenty of distance away. I'm going to go over some of these tools that we have. All right, you can already see with our terrain selected, we still have our terrain component here. What we're going to do is we're going to click this little menu right here. We can go to raise or lower terrain. And let's go over some of these options here in our component menu here. Brushes. This is the type of alpha or fall off our brushes have. So if you want something with a hard edge, you can use this one. Something that'll make a more gradual mound, pinpoint. And then we have a lot of noise brushes. And these right here should do us just fine. Brush size is how big the size of the brush is, as you can see here. That's a big brush size. And then we can get a quite small one as well, not just one. And opacity is how strong or the strength of the brush is. So I'm going to zoom out and show you how this brush works in action. I'm going to choose a hard brush at first with a brush size of 21, and let's give it an opacity of 50. So as you can see, a high opacity makes this really climb. I'm going to undo that. So let's lower our opacity down to 5. And as you can see, we can start sculpting. And then if you hold down Shift and left click, you can press sculpt down. And then we get something that's a little craggy now. If you wanted to now smooth this out, you would have to go up to terrain and go to the smooth height tool. And it works much the same way. Opacity is the strength of the smooth, and we can round out those tough angles right there. We can also, if you want to go back and set that height to what everything else is, you can go to the set height tool right here. And instead of flatten all, we can actually go in and paint this 100 strength down like a brush. So you can get it back to where it was originally. So those are the 4 basic ways we can sculpt. We can set the height to an exact elevation. We can smooth it, or we can use the sculpt, raise, or lower terrain to manually push and pull. So what I'm going to do now is just show you some methods that I use to sculpt out this level. So let's start by sculpting up. This is kind of a tricky one because I got a lot of steep elevations and a lot of different levels, ground level, then cathedral level up here. And just trying to, wing it, is a little hard. I mean, and then you go in and smooth. If you need something that needs to be exact, then try using the set height brush. And we're going to set this plateau's height. It's going to be a little bit of trial and error. So let's try like 200. Maybe 200 height will do good. And let's give it a opacity of 100 and pick the hard edge brush. All right, this will ensure that whatever we sculpt will immediately go up to 200. And as you can see, 200 is a little too tall. So let's try 150. Let's shoot it right in the middle. And 150 is a little too tall. See how it's barely coming up above? So let's try 140. We were almost there. Oh my goodness, 140 is like perfectly it. That's almost a coincidence. So a little bit of trial and error, but now you can see that I can sculpt my height of the plateau. And use your gray box. It's almost cheating. Use your gray box as a guide. So I'm going to go in and just trace this out. If it's getting in your way, don't worry. We have layers where we can hide it. You can see what's going on underneath. But I might leave it on and trace the outline. A little hard to see there. And that plateau will be our cathedral plateau, where the cathedral will sit. And I'm going to just go in and fill it in. All right. We'll go in and smooth all this stuff together in a second. But that's how you can use the set height tool to kind of sculpt in a large patch of ground that you need at a very specific height. So let's go back in and bring back my gray box. And if you mess up, don't worry, you can set your height back to 100. You can go in and refine it just a little bit more. We want that mountain pass to be just right. And you'll see that we're getting a little bit of stretching. The checkerboard is our texture, but we'll tackle that as soon as we start painting our textures. Next, I'm going to have to sculpt out this mountain path that kind of curves around back into the market. And I'm going to use the height tool once more to go back in and set a level a little bit at a time, then go in and smooth it all out. So if this is 140, I'm going to go in 10 levels of 10 increment. As you can see, there's like a stair step that gets put right there. Let me hide the layer and let me show you what it's doing. It's creating a stair step. And then we can go in and use our smooth terrain brush and just smooth that path right out. And if we bring back our gray box, we get something close to what we had in mind. That might have been too much of an extreme smooth. So let's do something like a 40% opacity. And let's smooth mainly on the side we want to come up to the 140. And then you can refine down here. All right, so let's just keep doing that. Smooth, set height, and then smooth it down. 120. Now we can start catching this ground right here. And then 110. So what we get is like this stair-stepped design going on. And then hopefully when I smooth it out, it'll become a more organic path. Let's hide our gray box so we can see. A little severe in some areas, but at least we got something going on. Now we can just go to our raise and lower height tool. Let's grab the soft brush, get a really low opacity, a really low brush, and try to fill some of this in. It's going to be bumpy at first, but we can use that to our advantage. Yeah. Let's smooth it out a little bit. Let's raise the opacity of that smooth brush. So the more gentle you just, gentle strokes, the gentle opacity, but you just keep buffing it and buffing it. And you can even do like an interval here. I'm going to go to 135, and it'll be a nice little buffer right there, 132. So I'm kind of taking this to the extreme. And then we can do 125 right here maybe. And then we'll go back in and smooth that out. So we get a more organic rise. And then we can go in with our raise and lower terrain, get a noisy brush, set its opacity to something like 2. And then we can just add variation to the terrain. At this point, it might be good to bring back our gray box, because we're definitely have to go in and refine some of this to match our houses, but we can get it pretty close. And of course, I'll probably go with another round of smoothing. As you can see, our gray box is like really offering a nice guide for us to take. And then let's just smooth it out. Let's grab my soft brush. You can go back in and add more variation if you need to. So I'm going to go ahead and keep moving. I'll spend more attention here and tweak and lower stuff as I need to. We're trying to match, the houses that we spent so much time placing down and everything too. So just to spend some time with it. Just work really large to begin with, like I'm showing you. Next, we're going to create the mountainous region around my area here. And we're going to do that with a set height once more. And I will go to 200 this time. And we're just going to do a strong opacity, big brush. And we're just going to block out our mountain. So this is kind of carved into a mountainside. I didn't like that stroke. Maybe take multiple strokes so when you undo something, you have something to come back to. And I guess the way I saw this was kind of like it doing something like this. Oops. And then the coastline just kind of extends. It's like a peninsula almost. And then from here, I'm just going to make my brush really big. Bigger. And I'm just building up my base volume for the mountainous region. And then I'm going to smooth this down so it's a little bit more organic. Let's do a set height to 150 right here. We'll kind of do that same stair step mentality. And 175 height right there. And then let's smooth it. We're just building out our volumes right now in a very nice way. Let's lower this terrain while it's clipping through. So just a little bit of refinement here and there. That's all it takes. All right, and now to build the mountains, we're going to grab a noisy brush. I'm going to make its strength pretty big. And oops, try not to mess with too much of what you've already done. Try different brushes if you want. And then we'll go in and smooth it to what we've already made. Just lower my brush. And lower my gray box. I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to unlock, and I'm going to go in and hide these walls that I put in. They're becoming very distracting. Instead of deleting them, I'm just going to go up to my inspector up here and just make them inactive. Same for my ground terrain now. I'm pretty good on what I need to do with this ground terrain. So let's click it and disable. My terrain's getting in the way of me clicking that, so we'll do the same to the terrain for a second. And we'll disable those. Really, I just want to keep the houses and any other kind of gray box props that I have. All right, great. So let's bring back my terrain by enabling it again. And there, we're getting a clear picture of what my level needs to look like. Let's go back in and refine some stuff. So I'm just going to go back to the set height tool here. My cathedral rests on the 140 plane. But instead of just going crazy opacity, let's do something a little bit more forgiving so we don't get crazy stretching on that texture. There we go. All right. I'll go back in later and refine these shapes so they match a little bit more. But really, it's just going to be a bunch of just tedious tweaking. And remember, sometimes you'll have to get a really low opacity to sculpt things just right. Get it to where you need to. So that's kind of the mountainous region around of what we're working with here. Now let's go in and make the ocean that will define kind of the rest of this. So we'll go to set height. I'm going to do might as well just do 0. And we'll make it pretty big and tough at first. So let's go in and just, it's almost like we're sculpting out our path here. So my mountainside path kind of curves around here. And everything out here is going to be ocean. So it does something like this. Slower my brush size and my opacity. And let's go in and refine our cliff side of our mountain. Let's set our brush back to 100, or our height on our brush to 100, and let's define out our mountain path just a little bit more. It's good to know what kind of elevations you're working with here. So when the player starts, they'll see that the mountain path curves around the mountain, but we won't have to worry with anything behind it. The player won't be able to go there and see where they came from. All right. So that's basically how we can sculpt stuff. Oh, I have one more detail to sculpt, and that's the little pond right here. Oh, it looks like I still got some walls there too. So we'll disable them. Let me lock back down my gray box. So I have like this little pond right here. So what I'm going to do is just go in and sculpt it out. I'm just going to do some real subtle sculpting with like 0.5 opacity and a small brush, soft brush. And I'm just going to start pushing it down here. Since this is going to rely on a body of water, I'm going to create a new plane here. Let's snap it up. And let's scale it. And this is going to kind of be like my water surface. so I can see exactly what's level and, how far down I need to sculpt this stuff. So that's the top of my water right there. Perfect. And we're going to grab that and put it into right above my terrain. And the more we push it down, the more the pond kind of reveals itself. And it's going to look kind of something like that. And then I kind of have like a little raised area right here where there's an item of interest. And the person's going to walk there, kind of walk through the water on an elevated path right here. I'm going to make a new material for this in my prototype. I created a water material with its rendering mode set to transparent here. And then in the albedo, right here, in this color wall, you can just set its alpha or its transparency. And you can see in the bottom right. So that's how we can create a water material. I'm just going to apply it onto that. It's pretty cool, isn't it? And then I'm just going to go in and grab my terrain again and just sculpt a path that's almost in the water, but not quite, that the player will be able to walk to and get the thing, the collectible. So a little bit too low now, or too high. So we're just going to kiss it right underneath the water here. Nice. So hopefully the player will know that they can walk through here, and we'll create some invisible walls so the player can walk on this section. And I just skipped and opened up my finished product with all my refinement that I've done, and I added some more mountain right there coming out of the water and made a water ocean plane. And this is basically sculpting our terrain.